Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Study Sessions. My name, of course, is Mr. Buff, and after the long summer break, we're back with new episodes. And in fact, today's episode is all about social responsibility in, of course, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now, this episode is designed to slot in neatly in the sequence of homeworks you're doing. So we're now on week 2 of the homework booklet, and the focus is on social responsibility in A Christmas Carol. So today's episode is going to track across really 3 key quotations plus a couple of short quotations from the extract as well, all relating to social responsibility. And I'm going to be working very hard to keep these episodes super short and really, really focused so you can make sure you use them each week. They become part of your homework process. You sit down, you listen to the episode, and then you crack on with your homework. Now, I've used that phrase, social responsibility, a phrase that we will be familiar with from our study of An Inspector Calls in Year 9. And of course, many of the things that an inspector calls wants us to think about, social responsibility, caring for others, is echoed in A Christmas Carol. Both texts are interested in how do we treat other people. So social responsibility might sound challenging, but it just very simply means caring for other people, recognizing that we all share a duty to help those in need, particularly the poor. Now, this was really important in the time of Charles Dickens. We're talking when the book was written in 1843, so the 1840s, because many Victorians, many wealthy Victorians, ignored the poor. Some of them even followed the ideas of people like Thomas Malthus, who was a man that argued around the same time as Dickens was about, who argued that if there were too many poor people, some should die, and that would keep the population under control. Doesn't sound very kind and compassionate, does it? Now, Dickens thought, as indeed I'm sure you do, Dickens thought this was cruel, and he wanted his story, A Christmas Carol, to change people's attitudes. So in this episode, I'm going to be exploring how Dickens presents social responsibility using really 3 key moments from the book. And it's always going to be the same sort of structure in these episodes. We're going to take one quotation and moment from the beginning, one from the middle of the story, and one from the end. And so, starting at the beginning, we're going to start with Scrooge's attitude. So our first quotation is right all the way back in stave 1, right at the very beginning. And when asked to give money to charity, infamously, Scrooge replies, and here's the quote, "If they would rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population," end quote. Now, this is a quotation that conveys Scrooge's complete lack, at the start of the story, of social responsibility. He treats poor people more like numbers rather than human beings. Now, Dickens is using this shocking line, putting these words in the mouth of Scrooge, to criticize that cold Malthusian view, so named after Thomas Malthus, who viewed the poor as a surplus. Oh, there's too many of them, so actually it's a good thing if some of them die. And remember, at this stage of the story, Scrooge symbolizes, he represents or stands in for greed, selfishness, and callous indifference, just not caring about people less fortunate. And so I've got a little reflection question. This is something you want to be thinking about when you are writing up your homework. Why do you think Dickens wants us to dislike Scrooge so much at the beginning of the story? What's he trying to show us there? Now we're going to move on to the middle, and we're thinking about those warnings from the Ghost of Christmas Present. So later on, and this is taking place in stave 3, so effectively the 3rd chapter, Scrooge meets, remember, the Ghost of Christmas Present. And the Ghost of Christmas Present represents generosity and community, togetherness, particularly at Christmas. This is the spirit that reminds Scrooge of his earlier cruelty by repeating Scrooge's words from stave 1 back to him. So the Ghost of Christmas Present says, "If he be like to die," he's talking about Tiny Tim here, "if he be like to die, he'd better do it and decrease the surplus population." So, first key point, hearing his own words thrown back at him. all over again forces Scrooge to feel guilt and shame for what he said earlier. He's sort of being shown this is what it looks like. Sure, you might say those words, decrease the surplus population, but what that means is people, poor children perhaps, like Tiny Tim, dying. How horrible is that? And Dickens makes readers realise that ignoring social responsibility, not caring about those less fortunate, those less well off, the poor, it means real suffering for people, children like Tiny Tim. But Dickens doesn't stop there, and this is where we're now thinking about that extract that you also have in your curriculum book, in your exam preparation book, sorry. The ghost also shows Scrooge two terrifying children hidden beneath the Ghost of Christmas Present's robe. And the Ghost of Christmas Present introduces them as, quote, "This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased." And then he says, "They are man's." Okay? Now, these children, ignorance and want, are symbols, personifications, representations of society's problems. Ignorance means a lack of education and understanding and knowledge, and want means something like extreme poverty or deprivation. The phrase, "they are man's," means that human beings, not nature, created these problems. There's poverty in society, and that's because of choices by people. Choices by people like Ebenezer Scrooge, the choice to not show social responsibility. Society is responsible for them. We are responsible for each other. That's the key message of the book. And Dickens, in this moment, when he says, "I see on his brow the word doom is written," okay, Dickens is warning readers, Scrooge at the same time, that if people like Scrooge, we as readers, don't show social responsibility, we don't take responsibility for caring for other people, society itself will face doom in the form of crime and violence and suffering. And now I've got another reflection question for you. So the question is this: why do you think Dickens personifies, so represents as children, as people, poverty and ignorance? Why does he represent poverty and ignorance as children? And think about, what impact does this have on the reader? What impact does it have on you as the reader? The fact that ignorance and want are children, they're not full grown adults. And then we're moving to the end, which of course is Scrooge's change, his transformation. By the end of the book, by the end of the novella, Scrooge is transformed. After the visits from the spirits, so we've got Marley's ghost, and then the ghost of Christmas past, Christmas present, and then Christmas yet to come. Okay, after he's had all of these experiences showing him the importance of social responsibility, getting him to reflect on how he's been living, okay, how he's been mistreating other people, how cold and cruel he's become, Scrooge is transformed. He realizes he's got to change. And he says this famous quotation: "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year." It's like a promise out loud, a pledge. So this is a quotation: "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year." It shows now that Scrooge understands by the end of the story his duty of social responsibility. He's got to show social responsibility. So Scrooge, by the end, becomes generous. He helps the Cratchits, he increases his pay, he gives money to charity, and he becomes, and here's a really useful little quotation, a second father to Tiny Tim. So Dickens ends the story with a message of hope. Even the most selfish person, even someone like Ebenezer Scrooge, can change, and society can improve. We can create a better society if we all as individuals take and show social responsibility, take and show responsibility for each other. So, final reflection question. Think about, how does Scrooge's transformation make him a role model for readers? When we read the story all about Scrooge's transformation, how do we feel that Scrooge by the end is something of a role model, someone that we think, actually, I think I need to behave a little bit more like Scrooge at the end of the story because I've been behaving a little bit like Scrooge at the start of the story. So, to wrap up, let's recap those key moments. We've got the beginning: decrease the surplus population. We've got Scrooge's selfish Malthusian view, refusal to care for the poor, to care for other people, to show social responsibility. It's the opposite of social responsibility, not my business, okay? Then we've got the middle of the story, the ghost actually repeating those words back at Scrooge, and Scrooge feels guilt. Plus, ignorance and want show that poverty and a lack of education are society's responsibility. Okay, we all have a role to play in tackling and dealing with ignorance and want. Okay, they are man's. And then we've got that final quotation: I will honor Christmas in my heart. And that's where Scrooge changes. A transformation is complete and he embraces social responsibility. He realizes social responsibility is what he needs to show. Okay, he's changed because of those visits from the four ghosts. So Dickens wanted his Victorian readers to learn that society should not ignore the poor. Problems like poverty and ignorance are human made, and it's our responsibility, Scrooge's responsibility, my responsibility, your responsibility to solve them. That is the heart of A Christmas Carol. So, as always, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Study Sessions. And remember, each week when we look at the homework, we're going to be thinking about one theme or perhaps one character or character relationship. We're going to look at 3 key moments: beginning, middle, end. It's a really simple way to be structuring your essays and make sure you show that understanding of the whole text in the exam. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for listening.